Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to go all maths teach you on you all. No, don't go away. Sort of. And try to explain what an MRP poll is, how it works, what it's used for, why you get so much variation in different MRP polls. This is what people have asked me to explain. So we're a bit overloaded with polls now, let's be honest, aren't we? I think everyone wants, I've even seen an analyst saying, can we have the election now, please? There's nothing really to talk about. Even the pollsters are getting bored with it all. More in Common have published their poll of, get this, how people who drink different alcoholic beverages intend to vote. If you're interested, the Tories have still retained the loyalty of sherry drinkers and they haven't completely lost the white wine drinkers. But there's a lot of confusion about the different types of poll, and as a result, a lot of people using them incorrectly. Now, some are doing so deliberately in order to fool people into voting a particular way. There are a lot of charlatans about. There's quite a few of them standing for Parliament. But most people are just genuinely not sure what the difference is. So I'm going to try to explain what an MRP poll is in simple terms, because this is the one you always get during the general election, or we have done for the past few. These are the polls which produce breakdowns of how individual constituencies are likely to vote, and therefore you can build up a picture of how many seats individual parties are likely to win. Some people try to work out seat results using voting intention polls. That doesn't work. A voting intention poll works with a sample of 1,000 to 2,000 people usually, and then matches the types of voters included in the proportion in which they're expected to vote across the country. It produces a breakdown of what percentage of voters are likely to vote for different parties, but across the country, not in individual constituencies. And that's it. If you try to use them to read anything else into them, including how many seats different parties win, you're speculating with crow's entrails. During a general election campaign, you don't have to do that, because for seats won, we have something we don't really have between elections, MRP polls. So let's break down what this means and how it works. MRP stands for multi-level regression post-stratification. Oh, that sounds horrendous, but I think I can simplify it for you. The first thing to note, there are two distinct parts to this. There's the multi-level regression, which is one thing, and there's the post-stratification, which is another. So in statistics, regression is just the linking together of variables. In the case of an MRP poll, what we're trying to link are the characteristics of voters with their voting intentions. So with an MRP poll, the pollsters need way more people taking part than a voting intention poll. Like, never mind 1,000 to 2,000, you're talking like 20,000, sometimes more. And they ask the people being surveyed a whole series of questions about characteristics which can be linked to voting intention. So they will want to know your age, where you live, your level of education, whether you are a student, a worker, own your own business, retired. Do you own your own home, or do you rent, or do you live with others? Do you have children? If so, are you a single parent? Are you part of a family? Are you married or you're not? Do you own your own car? Do you use public transport? Do you use private transport? You know, how did you vote? They still ask, how did you vote in the Brexit referendum? You know, sort of your social grade. They ask about anything which is known to be linked to voting preferences, and then they break you down into your constituent parts of demographics. That's sort of the regression. The reason it's called multi-level regression is because some of your demographic characteristics will put you with one group of voters, but then others might put you in a different group. For example, you might own your own business and you might be on a good income, but maybe you don't own your own home and maybe you only use public transport. So on an individual basis, a particular respondent to the poll might be nested in several different groups. So out of maybe 20,000 people taking part in the poll, which is fairly standard, you might get 16 million different types of voter represented as the different characteristics are split apart and recombined. As part of the process, they will also want to know what your past voting behaviour was, as well as your current voting intention. This is needed for the regression analysis, linking those characteristics with probabilities of voting for different parties or independents, as the case may be, but that tends not to show up much on an MRP. So that's the multi-level regression part. The next is post-stratification. Now, stratification is where you break down the populations in your sample into groups or strata. The reason why it's called post-stratification in MRP polls is really because stratification technically means you predetermine these groups ahead of sampling. But you can't do that in a poll like this. So you'll have to get your sample first and then divide them afterwards. So the post just means, like literally in the Latin term, it means afterwards. You do the thing afterwards. In an MRP poll, this post-stratification essentially takes the form of using like census and other data to work out how these different strata are represented in individual constituencies. And because their model has worked out how different strata are likely to vote, and they know how different constituencies have been voting in the past, they're able to build up a picture of the likely voting intention on a constituency by constituency basis. And that is how you get your seat breakdown using the best method that pollsters currently have. And it's also how, as long as it's working, you can look at individual seats and go, oh, you know, it's probably going to be that party win, and this party will be so many % behind them. But you may have noticed that there've been quite a few different MRP polls published. They're not entirely consistent with each other. There are some individual seats where they disagree quite a lot. There are some individual results, like overall results, where they disagree quite a lot. So what gives? Well, like with anything else, there are bad ones and good ones. An MRP is not a foolproof method that will be applied the same by all pollsters. It's a mathematical model. How you build and apply the model is important. For example, MRP really made its name in the 2017 general election. Existed before, but 2017 really raised its profile. But it could have gone disastrously wrong. Lord Ashcroft, who's a notable pollster, he produced an MRP poll which got the results quite badly wrong. Now, had he been flying the flag for MRP, it may never have taken off. But YouGov, in the same year, produced their own MRP, which was essentially spot on, even getting some really surprising seat calls right. And so pollsters started to use MRPs to forecast seat projections in 2019. The results weren't quite as accurate as in 2017, but the best players still produced something within the margin of error, albeit the Conservatives performed at the upper end of expectations. And the MRP model is essentially subject to two major factors which can change the results quite a bit. The first factor is the quality of your data. For example, I said that past voting behaviour is needed for this, but false recall is a potential problem here. Now, it might sound weird, but some people genuinely forget how they voted last time because a lot of people make their mind up quite close to the day or on the day itself or in the polling station itself. This means that if you ask them a few years later how they voted, they may say they voted Liberal Democrat, but actually maybe they voted Conservative. YouGov did some research on this to show the scale of the problem. I'll link their article in the description below if you're interested. There are other ways in which the data may not be great as well. For example, online polls are known to produce inflated support for Reform UK compared with telephone surveying. And that, you know, when you're talking about, there's a lot of constituents at the moment that are believed to be, you know, very, very close to whether it's one candidate or another that wins. Something like Reform UK, how many Conservative votes they're taking, that matters. That could change dozens of seats if you get it slightly wrong. There are plenty of other sources of potential problem as well. Second major factor are your assumptions. There are always assumptions in any mathematical model. It can't ever be a perfect representation of the world because you're trying to model people's future behaviour. Some will turn out to be more valid than others. There are particular problems this year as well because so many boundaries have changed. It means there are lots of seats around the country, and a lot of seats around the country, where we don't actually have past results at all. And that's vital for the technique to work. It's like, how did they vote the last election? We don't really know because the constituencies are very different now. You will see in MRP polls, it says for the 2019 results, presumed results. Undecided voters are another area where assumptions are required. Undecided voters are people considered likely to vote, but how they will vote and in what proportion, even if you know their previous voting behaviour, is not that straightforward. You know, you would imagine a lot of them would revert back to their normal voting behaviour. But actually, in an election where lots of things are changing, lots of attitudes are changing, will they? Also, some will stay at home. Some may have voted all their life, but this year, actually, they won't vote. So how many? And how many do you put into each of those little buckets? This is a source of error which is likely to be greater this year because, like I said, voters are looking at this election very differently to the sort of trends that we've had in recent elections. So different pollsters will produce different results to one another because they use different methods to collect their data and they use different methods to build their models. And then they will finish off their models with manual adjustments in order to massage the results into something they find believable, sort of like the hand decorations on a cake to finish it off. Different pollsters have made different decisions about these adjustments, which can change the results as well. Finally, it's worth noting some of the things that MRP polls cannot do. Even if your data is good and your model has only the finest, most valid assumptions powering it. Because it is fueled by a sample of people across the country, it cannot take account of unusually local issues. For example, a very popular candidate is probably going to do better than the MRP would suggest. An unusually unpopular candidate is likely to do worse. The data collected finds out essentially about your party voting intentions, not about individual candidates, which also means that prominent independent campaigns also throw a massive spanner in the works. An MRP has absolutely no chance of getting the result anything like right in, say, Islington North, where Jeremy Corbyn is standing against Labour, or Rochdale with George Galloway, or even Clacton, where Nigel Farage attracts support way beyond that of the party he leads. So that's what an MRP poll is. It's not perfect. It is the best we have for working out seat projections across the country, except where there are massive local issues, which doesn't affect that many seats, for which you might need a constituency poll, except constituency polls also have their own problems as well. But let's not go there, or this will turn into a full-scale lecture. But hopefully that explains what MRP polls are for those who've been asking. Please don't use voting intention polls for seat projections, even if you've put it through electoral calculus. It's all we had before the election campaign, but it was largely a bit of form. You know, it doesn't work. You may as well ask your magic 8-ball. But there we are. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.